In the days before the WWE Network and billion-dollar deals with Netflix, WWE relied heavily on revenue from pay-per-views. It was up to WWE to come up with compelling storylines leading to major matches that would convince fans to part with their cash. Despite their best efforts, although occasionally there was very little effort, big-time matches that seemed like they would do decent box office ended up tanking for one reason or another. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are 10 major WWE matches that bombed on pay-per-view. Join us. Number 10, Shawn Michaels vs. Vader at SummerSlam 1996. WWE business was on the downswing in 1996, and facing competition from the increasingly hot WCW, there wasn't a single Federation pay-per-view that broke 300,000 buys the entire year. While there were many disappointing numbers to post-mortem, the buy rate for that year's SummerSlam must have been a major cause for concern. Generating just 157,000 domestic buys, WWE's biggest party of the summer was close to being a total washout, doing worse numbers than King of the Ring and not being too far off some of the better performing In Your House events from that year. SummerSlam 96 was, of course, headlined by world champion Shawn Michaels defending his title against Vader. The Heartbreak Kid may have been a great wrestler, and his match with the Mastodon was customarily excellent, but the numbers suggest that he wasn't a big draw, at least when it came to pay-per-view. For comparison, SummerSlam the year prior, headlined by Diesel defending the title against King Mabel, drew a still not great 205,000 buys, while the year after, main evented by The Undertaker defending against Bret Hart, did 235,000. Needless to say, Vader time was very much over when WWE saw the SummerSlam number. Number 9, Daniel Bryan vs. Randy Orton at Battleground 2013. 2013 was a funny old year for WWE on pay-per-view, as it started off great thanks to the presence of The Rock, but dipped big during the second half as it was rapidly becoming apparent that the time was right for the WWE Network to replace traditional order-only events. The numbers for SummerSlam and Survivor Series may have made for grim reading at WWE HQ, but the buy rate that October's Battleground pulled would have had alarm bells ringing. The show only managed to attract a paltry 114,000 buys worldwide, making it the lowest drawing WWE pay-per-view since ECW December to Dismember in 2006. A generally awful show with a weak undercard, the main attraction was Randy Orton and Daniel Bryan clashing for the vacant WWE title. However, this was their second pay-per-view outing within a month, the two men having headlined Night of Champions just a few weeks earlier. The few who did bother to part with their hard-earned cash were far from rewarded with a good show, the no-contest finish to the main event drawing particular scorn from fans and critics. Number 8, the Royal Rumble match at Royal Rumble 1989. These days, the Royal Rumble pay-per-view, or premium live event if you're that way inclined, is one of the most anticipated on the entire pro wrestling calendar. The main draw is, of course, the Royal Rumble matches themselves, which generate excitement not just because fans get to see who will go on to challenge for a world title at WrestleMania, but also because of the storyline twists and turns and surprise appearances that have become the Battle Royal's calling cards. That said, things were a lot different in 1989. The first Rumble had been a televised special the year prior, drawing a mammoth rating for the USA Network. WWE would have been hopeful that the strong rating could have converted into pay-per-view buys a year later, but that turned out to not be the case. In fact, the 89 Rumble drew a hugely disappointing 165,000 buys. For context, the 1988 Survivor Series a couple of months earlier had been good for 310,000, whilst WrestleMania 5, headlined by Randy Savage and Hulk Hogan's mega-powered world title scrap, drew a monster 767,000. Why the first pay-per-view Rumble flopped so hard is something of a mystery, but things would get better starting with 1990's 260,000 buys. Number 7, Bret Hart vs. Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania XII. If there's one pay-per-view WWE could typically count on doing big business at the box office, it was WrestleMania. After all, it was the most hyped event of the year and the one that WWE usually reserved for its biggest and best matches. For WrestleMania 12 in 1996, the biggest and best match WWE felt they had to offer was WWE Champion Bret Hart defending against Shawn Michaels in the first ever televised 1-hour Iron Man match. The intrigue of seeing two of WWE's finest do battle for 60 minutes over the company's richest prize was apparently lacking though. The show, which also featured The Undertaker taking on Diesel, The Ultimate Warrior's return, and a Hollywood backlot brawl between Roddy Piper and Goldust, drew a lamentable 290,000 pay-per-view buys. That was down from the celebrity-heavy WrestleMania XI, headlined by NFL star Lawrence Taylor and Bam Bam Bigelow, which drew a still disappointing 340,000. It's fair to say that people perhaps just didn't know what they were going to get with Bret vs. Shawn, an all-babyface affair that lacked heat and had been primarily built up via video packages of each man training for the grueling contest. Number 6, Psycho Sid vs. The Undertaker at WrestleMania XIII. Well, if WWE thought things were going to get any better a year later, they were bang out of luck, because the buy rate for WrestleMania XIII made Mania 12's numbers look like good news. So just how bad was it? 237,000 buys. Yep, 237,000 buys for WrestleMania. There is no other way to say it than this was a monumental disaster for the company, but why was the buy rate so low, and could it have been better? Well, if Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart had been the main event as planned, it may have done, but HBK lost his smile and WWE shuffled the deck. Hart ended up wrestling Steve Austin in a submission match, while Psycho Sid defended the world title against The Undertaker. Stone Cold and the Hitman had a true classic that wouldn't have looked out of place main eventing the pay-per-view. The Dead Man and the Master and Ruler of the World, though, not so much. It was a weak main event on paper, and it ended up being weak in the ring too. A year later, things were looking much healthier as Mania 14, headlined by Michaels vs. Austin with Mike Tyson as the guest enforcer, pulled in 730,000 buys. Number 5, Shawn Michaels and John Cena vs. The Undertaker and Batista at No Way Out 2007. Not to turn this into a Shawn Michaels Undertaker bash fest, but while both men are legends of the industry, they didn't always do big business when it came to pay-per-view. And that was true when they were on opposite sides of the ring at No Way Out 2007. Though it was supposedly a SmackDown exclusive pay-per-view, the main event of the show was an inter-brand dream tag match pitting the Blue Brand's Taker and Batista against Michaels and John Cena. Adding to the intrigue, Michaels and Cena were then World Tag Team Champions, while the two teams were set to clash against one another in singles matches at the next pay-per-view, WrestleMania 23. Despite the stakes and the star power, and despite the match itself being really bloody good, fans were not persuaded to cough up and see how it all unfolded. No Way Out 07 did a positively rubbish 205,000 buys, lower than other recent B-shows like Cyber Sunday, Armageddon, and New Year's Revolution. It was no great surprise to see WWE formally scrap the single brand concept after the numbers came in, and they didn't run another brand exclusive pay-per-view until Backlash 2016. Number 4, Bret Hart vs. the British Bulldog at In Your House 5 Seasons Beatings. It feels a bit naughty to include an In Your House event, given that they were WWE's 2-hour cut price pay-per-views and were never going to do the sort of business the top 4 were capable of. That said, the 5th In Your House, titled Seasons Beatings, is worth discussing as it represented a new low for a company desperately in need of a spark. The show had a very weak undercard, with gimmick bouts like Mabel and The Undertaker's casket match and Triple H colliding with Henry Godwinn in a hog pen match being the most interesting things on it. Seasons Beatings had a juicy main event, however, as Bret Hart made his first pay-per-view defense since beating Diesel to recapture the WWE title at Survivor Series the previous month. Not only that, it would be a rematch of the SummerSlam 92 main event, which is generally considered an all-time classic. Though Bret and Bulldog had another absorbing and radically different match in Hershey, Pennsylvania, fans at home were unmoved. The show drew a horrible 80,000 buys, meaning it was barely profitable for the company. Number 3, Brock Lesnar vs. Eddie Guerrero at No Way Out 2004. Eddie Guerrero defeating Brock Lesnar to win the WWE title in the main event of No Way Out 2004 is, to many, one of the greatest moments in WWE history. Fans rejoiced at the undersized but undeniably charismatic Latino Heat slaying the Beast, but while the match may have helped sell out San Francisco's Cow Palace, it didn't make waves on pay-per-view. The number for the show ended up being 265,000 buys, which might seem good on the surface, but was considered a very disappointing number at the time. Of course, the show's undercard was uninspiring, with all due respect to Nydia and Jamie Noble's blindfold match, and this was Eddie's first time in the main event, but buys were way down down from the previous 2 years, which were admittedly loaded with star power. The truth is, WWE were banking on the Hispanic market shelling out for their new hero, and that didn't happen to nearly the degree they had hoped. As a silver lining, No Way Out at least did better than Raw's Armageddon from a couple of months earlier, which was headlined by Goldberg defending his World Heavyweight title against Triple H and Kane and did 240,000 buys. Number 2, Hulk Hogan vs. Mr. McMahon at WrestleMania 19. Under normal circumstances, 560,000 pay-per-view buys would be considered great going, but not for WrestleMania, and certainly not for a WrestleMania as stacked as Mania 19. The card was loaded with major matches, including Kurt Angle vs. Brock Lesnar for the WWE title, The Rock vs. Steve Austin, and Chris Jericho taking on Shawn Michaels in an intergenerational dream match. Now, with so many main event level matches on offer, and we didn't even mention Triple H defending his World Heavyweight title against Booker T, it might be a bit sly to blame this one particular match for the show's failure. However, the fact is, most of the promotion for the show was centered around Hulk Hogan vs. Mr. McMahon in a street fight, and many critics after the fact wondered whether putting so much focus on the part-timer taking on a non-wrestler may have ended up hurting WWE in the pocket.
This was a rare occasion where the Royal Rumble actually did a bigger number, 585,000, than Mania, while No Way Out, built around Rock Hogan 2 and the return of Steve Austin, did 450,000.
Naturally, neither Hogan nor McMahon took any blame for the Mania buy rate. Number 1, the Extreme Elimination Chamber match at December to Dismember 2006. Anyone who wanted to order ECW's December to Dismember in 2006 could have only been excited about 2 matches. I mean, literally, as that's all WWE bothered to advertise prior to the show going on air. Those matches were the opener, a tag match between Eminem and the Hardys, and the main event, an Extreme Elimination Chamber match for Big Show's ECW title. A major gimmick match over a world title featuring Show, Bobby Lashley, Rob Van Dam, CM Punk, Test and Sabu, who was replaced on the night by Hardcore Holly, couldn't offset the pitiful pre-pay-per-view promotion or the waning interest in ECW as a brand. Generally regarded as one of the worst pay-per-views in WWE history, December to Dismember barely deserved the 90,000 buys it generated and absolutely nothing more. The chamber match itself wasn't half bad, no classic, that's for sure, but the removal of Sabu, coupled with the decision to have Lashley rather than the popular RVD or Punk go over, ensured that many fans had a bad taste in their mouth when it was over. And you know what? The laughably bad buy rate ensured that this was the last ever ECW pay-per-view. An extremely crappy way to go out.